Okay. Hello, everyone. Hi. Good to see you all. Thanks for coming. It's a full house. Love it. I'm Samantha. I'm the lead educator here. Welcome to Senior Wednesday. Our Senior Wednesday program is every January through October at 10 a.m. on the fourth Wednesday of the month. A related museum tour follows the program, and it is hosted by the museum and its friends group and generously funded by the Charles and Joanne McIlwaine Foundation. And today we're excited to welcome our very own Curator of Collections, Jami Frazier Tracy. Jami's journey with the museum began in the 1980s as an intern, followed by a few years at Cowtown. She returned to us in 1990 as curator and has been sharing her incredible expertise and passion ever since. Jami is our go-to expert on all things Wichita, especially local fashion history, and she's also a talented thrifter with an eye for style. We always love her outfits. Most recently, she collaborated with the Wichita Art Museum and Kansas State University's Historic Costume and Textile Museum on the exhibit Little Black Dress at 100, which is currently on view at the Art Museum. So please join me in welcoming Jami.
Thank you, Sam, and thanks everyone for being here. I see some old friends from my Cowtown days. I see some family members. I don't see any foes, but there might yet still be some in the audience. Thanks for that introduction, Sam. So I thought we'd start with kind of a definition of what is a thrift store. Thrift stores sell donated, used, or secondhand items to the public at moderate prices, often as a way to support charitable organizations or causes. So that's a key component to a thrift store in my mind, that there's some sort of charity-driven mission, often operated by a civil, social, or church group. So it differs from a junk shop. It differs from a secondhand store. There's truly a charitable mission to these kinds of stores. I encourage you to donate to thrift stores, to shop at thrift stores. By promoting green practices, encouraging the reuse of items, and providing funds and services to underserved audiences, thrift stores support the community in important ways, and you never know what you'll find at the thrift store. A few thrift stores in Wichita, this is certainly not a comprehensive list, but a few that kind of stand out in my mind are AMVETS, the DAV, Goodwill Industries, First and Grace Prez Economia Corner, the Junior League Thrift Shop, the League of Women Voters Rummage and Curio Shop, St. Vincent de Paul Store, and the Salvation Army Red Shield Store. Wichita actually has a really long history of supporting thrift stores. The first thrift store opened in Wichita in 1923, and if you do the math, that's over a century ago. This is a view of Wichita in 1923. It's looking on Douglas Avenue, East Douglas Avenue looking west. You see the Broadview Hotel. They're anchoring the end. A lot of business activity in downtown, a lot of commerce, a lot of entertainment, a lot of theater. So everything was really happening downtown in 1923. Here's a closer view of that same image, showing the cars parked along the curb, no parking meters, trolleys, streetcars, lots of pedestrians. Wichita's population at this time was about 85,000, and as I said, most of the commercial and entertainment activity was really focused in downtown at that time. That first thrift store that opened in 1923 was the League of Women Voters Thrift Shop. And they had a motto of carrying everything from buttons to automobiles. Well, that's pretty ambitious. They only lasted for about a year. I don't know that there were too many donations of automobiles coming their way in 1923, as the automobile was a fairly new invention. But they did focus primarily on men's and boys' clothing, and they used the funds from their shop to carry forward their mission of the League of Women Voters. The woman at the upper left here is Eileen B. Walker, or upper right, I'm sorry, upper right. She was her family owned Walker Brothers department store, so she was certainly well-versed in retailing and merchandising, but not enough to save the thrift shop. The second thrift store to open in Wichita was Goodwill Industries. They opened in 1931. What was happening across the country in 1931? The Depression. Perfect time to open a thrift store, I would say. And this article from 1931 describes kind of their goal. The plan of Goodwill Industry is to help people help themselves. It is a salvage work and organization which collects cast-off articles, repairs, and sells them. The project affords many person jobs at a small wage and is largely self-sufficient. So this was not a new idea, as the article goes on to say. This was not new to the country. They were all over the East, but this was a new idea to Wichita. And they only operated here for a couple of years. Here's another newspaper clipping from the Wichita Eagle, 1931. And it shows one of the workers in the shop. You can see that she's holding a crutch. So she's got some mobility issues and would be hard-pressed to find gainful employment. So she found an opportunity at Goodwill. And there's a table there next to her with a pile of clothing that she will be sorting later, and then a rack behind her with things for sale. And it indicates when she's not waiting on customers, she's found mending, cleaning, and pressing garments, getting them ready to sell to poorer people who want clean, serviceable clothing and cannot afford to buy new. Goodwill, for some reason, left Wichita in 1933, and I was never able to determine why, but they did come back to Wichita in 1965, and they're still here today, obviously. This image from the Wichita Eagle of 1965 shows them preparing their temporary headquarters. It was 214 West Douglas. That's about where the Kiva is now. And again, it indicates that their organization will employ and train handicapped persons, and the pilot project will employ 25 to 30 people. Oops, I skipped a slide. Remember I said you'd never know what you'll find at the thrift store? In 2005, the Goodwill at Central and I-235 discovered a grenade had been donated. So they called the police and the bomb squad came. That's actually happened here at the museum as well. We've had a grenade was donated once, and I did the exact same thing. We called the police. So I encourage you to donate to thrift stores and to the museum, but grenades, maybe keep those in the family. The Junior League opened in 1932. They opened their store at 21st and North Market, which is across from the Nomar Theater. They opened their shop to raise funds for their charitable projects and to provide good used merchandise for the community. When they opened in 32, they specified that the proceeds would be used for the day nursery, which was a service offered to working mothers. And also the Milk and Ice Fund. So the Junior League, their focus was obviously children, the Junior League. So that's where their efforts were based. They opened their thrift store only in the fall and winter. They closed in the summer. This image is from 33, and it indicates a large crowd is waiting to get into the League salvage shop, for back to school shopping. Here's another view, busy day at Junior League shop. This is from 1933. And it shows a woman behind the counter helping with a customer, and you see the great, probably things from the 1920s in their thrift store behind them. And then the woman at the bottom is identified as Louise Vesper, and she is helping to do some merchandising. And Mrs. Vesper actually donated some things to the Historical Museum. One of the things that the League required of their volunteers was that they donate 2 bags of clothing every year to the shop. And if you've seen that exhibit at the Wichita Art Museum, the little black dress, there's a really terrific 1888 morning dress as you first walk in, large bustle. She donated that to the museum in 1972. So I'm very grateful that she did not donate that to the Junior League when she was working there in the 30s. That skirt would easily fill 2 bags. It's quite voluminous. Another view of the Junior League shop. This is from 1937. Again, whereas Goodwill employed their staff, the Junior League relied on volunteers. They would have had a paid manager, but most of the staff would have been the Junior League members themselves, so they worked as volunteers. And they're seen here mending some clothing. You've got racks of shoes behind them. Goodwill really did kind of meet that brief of everything from buttons to automobiles. You can buy cars at the Goodwill. The Junior League had a more closely honed focus on primarily clothing, men, women, and children's clothing, some accessories, maybe some housewares, but primarily clothing. Another view of the Junior League shop. This is from, I believe, 1964. Mrs. Ralph Foster there at the far right was a museum volunteer, so I wanted to include this photograph. But again, a really wonderful rack of clothes that the Junior League members had donated to the shop and would have been made available to the community. I love these photographs. This is from 1969, and you see 2 models, 2 women on the far side modeling, a pink silk twill suit with decorator buttons, and then the young woman is wearing a really stylish mod dress. And then the little boy at the center is Pat Bushka. Some of you may know him, but he's wearing a very charming outfit for a little boy. And then Joan Bushka, she's modeling the After 5 look. Joan was a museum board member here for many years and was instrumental in starting our endowment fund. And she's modeling a lime silk crepe designer dress. The price of the dress is under $20. Doesn't that sound like a bargain? If you adjust that for inflation, it's almost $200 for a dress in the thrift store. That's more than I would ever pay for even a car at the thrift store. The next thrift store we'll talk about is the Economy Corner, my all-time favorite thrift store. I found so many wonderful things there. I got this belt at the Economy Corner and this shirt at the Economy Corner. They opened in 1960. It was a program of the Women's Association of the First Presbyterian Church. They opened it to raise funds for the church building project. It was so successful that they kept that program going and later included Grace Presbyterian Church into the store. And that supported, once they raised the funds for the building project, then those funds would go for church missions, children's programs, and provided free clothing to those in need. That was a really wonderful ministry that the Economy Corner had, that they would provide free clothing to individuals twice a year, a full, complete set, for those that really just couldn't afford anything. So really lament that they're no longer there. Here's a view of the Economy Corner in 1963. Much like that Junior League model, they would have had a paid manager, but the rest of the staff would have been volunteers from the church. Their church would have provided much of the merchandise that was carried in the store. They spent a lot of time making things look very attractive, cleaning things. They would launder the things before they were put out. They did carry, as you can see on the walls, some framed pictures and photographs. Later, they carried record albums and books, so a little more comprehensive than maybe just clothing as the Junior League carried, but not quite as expansive as Goodwill. And you can see the volunteers having a wonderful time getting things ready for their store. In that same article, they talk about the store with a strong sense of mission. And to me, this is, again, what's really important about these thrift stores is that they're not just providing items to the community, there's a service aspect. There's a charitable mission component, and it talks about the history of the church and of the store. In the very bottom, it indicates the shop has regular customers who come in frequently, liking the friendly attitude and the chance for human companionship. Some, the board suspects, come in for the warmth of the heated shop in winter and to enjoy its air conditioning in summer. Sometimes the obvious need of a child may cause a whispered conversation between volunteers and the donation of a warm, bright coat. So it's not just a transactional situation. It really is driven by the women and the men who worked there and their desire to be of service to the community. Where did all these great things come from that end up in our thrift stores? So we'll talk a little bit about from retail to resale. And as I did with the thrift stores, it's not going to be a comprehensive, I'm sorry, I'm ignoring the entire side of this room. It's not going to be a comprehensive description. I'm going to focus on two main department stores, the two department stores that I think are the most important. And the first one is Ennis, which opened in 1897. It was established by Walter Ennis. It was a family store. It sold to Yonkers in 1951. Yonkers sold it to Macy's in 1955. Macy's kept that Ennis name well into the 60s. And then Macy's sold it to Dillard's in 1986, and then the store finally closed in 88. This view is of their location at First and North Main, about 1900. You can see some of the display windows here at the bottom. One side shows women's shirtwaist tops and probably a black wool skirt. The other side shows it's a display of Colgate products, so talcum powder, lotions, really the kind of thing that you might expect to find in a drugstore rather than a department store. But at this time, the idea of a department store was a little bit in the future. You can see that they're touting dry goods, carpets, and millinery. Millinery is another word for hats. Ennis had a lot of fashion shows. This is one from 1916, and you see at the center platform here, I'm almost afraid to touch this. I'm afraid I'm going to advance this. Well, you can see the center platform there has the models, women and some little girls. The audience is primarily women. Most of these fashion shows were for women. I'm sorry, women's clothes are just generally more interesting. And love the way that the audience is dressed, terrific hats. Houndstooth must have been very popular that year because you see a lot of houndstooth in the audience. But yeah, really terrific photograph. And all the photographs that I'm showing are from our collection, and all of the newspaper clippings are from newspapers.com. In 1927, Ennis opened a new $1 million home, and this was at Broadway and William. It was Lawrence at the time, but it was Broadway and William. And it was the finest store building in the entire Southwest. And, I really believe that's true. I know people did come from all over the state to shop at Ennis. It was a very popular department store. In 1948, they added this 8-story addition, which you can see on the far side. And they really expanded some of the departments. And I'm going to read you the list of what they had at this in a store in 1948. And it's a long list. Men's, women's, and children's clothing and shoes, restaurants, the tea room. Does anyone remember the tea room? Appliances, so washing machines, hand mixers, stoves, record shop, luggage, bookshop, bakery, candy shop, silverware, jewelry, beauty shop, toys, bedding and linens, fabric, housewares, china and glass, art needlework, lamps, linoleum, rugs, carpets, draperies and curtains, decorator sample rooms, furniture, a budget shop. They also had a hospital and an auditorium. So you couldn't ask for a more comprehensive department store than Ennis. They did have budget-friendly items, and they also had very high-end items. They had everything from Christian Dior, Patillo Joe Copeland, Howard Greer, down to the bargain basement, as we kind of talked about earlier. So, a lot of offerings for a wide audience. They were very well known for their elaborate windows, especially at Christmas time. And I know a lot of people remember these vividly. You see the Santa figure at the center, surrounded by these fairy tale figures. John Hammond was the display director at Ennis for decades, and he had a team of people that put together these windows, and they did them often, and they were very lavish, very sophisticated, and John Hammond gave us a lot of these photographs that I'm showing you now. And he was the son of Ben Hammond of Hoots and Quacks fame. Here's another Christmas window showing Santa and the sled with elves, a pedal tractor, bicycle, dolls, reindeer. I mean, just a kid's dreamland, really. I love this one. The movie Picnic came out in 1955, and so there are some picnic kind of things happening, and when I saw this photograph, I wanted to include it because Picnic's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I love to picnic. So here the theme is Summer is a Circus at Ennis, and it demonstrates that you can buy everything you need for a picnic in your backyard, not at the park, at your suburban house backyard. You could buy a picnic table, the tablecloth, you could buy Dad a novelty apron, the grill, the cap. You could buy a really beautiful blouse and hat for Mom, the little boy or girl, I can't quite tell, but outfits for everyone. All the housewares, all the dinner plates, all the accoutrements, the thermos, everything you wanted for a picnic you could buy at Ennis. And again, this is another example of the extreme lengths they went to advertise and merchandise their products in the windows. The tea room. I have to confess I was never in Ennis, so I never saw the tea room, but I've heard so many stories about it, and people have so many great memories of it. I know they did a lot of fashion shows there, they had a lot of luncheons there, and it was a very popular destination for Wichitans for decades. They did this kind of thing, it looks unusual to us, but they did this kind of thing all the time. They would put automobiles in the store windows. They had a relationship with Byron Stout, Pontiac Chevrolet, and they would park these cars to promote the car. I happen to know this is a 1957 Pontiac Chieftain, and it's also promoting Jonathan Logan fashions, and we have a Jonathan Logan dress on exhibit across the way. It's a blue and white gingham kind of fit and flare. But these women are getting ready for a very sophisticated road trip. They've got their suitcases there that you could buy at Ennis. They're wearing Jonathan Logan designs, which you could buy at Ennis. The lovely shoes you could buy at Ennis. And starred for fashion, so a really, really great promotion with Byron Stout, a local car dealer. This is that same year, 1957. This is an interior view of the store. Again, just giving you an idea of how comprehensive the offerings were. Everything from bathroom tissue to expensive perfumes to designer dresses to washing machines. I mean, just very comprehensive. And each one of these little counter stations would have someone with a cash register. Someone asked me recently if they had shopping carts in these stores. And I said, no, of course not, they didn't. But to a person now, that seems reasonable. I mean, you don't walk into very many stores without picking up a shopping cart. But there would be a cash register at each location, and you would take your purchases there. You might charge it to your account. You might take your package. You might have them send your package to your home. So a very, very different way of shopping. Here's another view. This is from 1963. I wanted to include this one because when I started thrifting in the early 80s, these things were so common. You could find these kinds of dresses so easily. Why? Because they were like 20 years old. I mean, they weren't that old. I mean, it was a long time ago. But these are the kinds of things now that if I found something like this in a thrift store now, I would be so elated. And I remember in the 80s thinking it was very commonplace. But those shapes, those styles, we have a few on exhibit across the hall, but very representative of what you could find at thrift stores in the 80s very, very easily. This view is from 1952, and it's just outside the building. So you can see the very corner of the building here, and then across the street is the old Sears store, and I think later it was Jenkins Music. Thank you. I knew someone would correct me if I got it wrong. And then Innis, you see Innis there on the corner. That 8-story addition is in the foreground, and then the 27 building is behind. That's now the Kansas School of Osteopathic Medicine. For a time, it was the state office building, but now it's the Kansas School of Osteopathic Medicine. It looks largely the same from the exterior. And just across the street is another department store that I'd like to talk about, and that is Henry's. Henry's opened in 1922. It became Henry's, or opened at Levitt and Son in 22 and became Henry's in 28 when the oldest Levitt son took over. This view is from 1929. They had just installed this neon signage, and we're very proud of it, obviously. At this time, Henry's only carried men's and boys' clothing and accessories. They did not carry women's wear at all. But when they moved to this new location in 48, that's when they did add a full line of women's clothing. And as I mentioned, this is right across the street from Innis, and you can see the Alice Hotel just there on the other side. When they completed this store, a full line of women's apparel was added. Over the next 40 years, 5 new stores would open at locations across the city under the leadership of Leo Levitt. So Innis only had that one store. Innis never had satellite stores. Henry's at one time had 5 different stores across Wichita. When Henry died in 68, Leo took over, and then Leo died in 70, and his wife Rochelle became president, a position she retained until 1984. Designs by Norman Norell, Bill Blass, and Halston were featured at Henry's, and the store was renowned for their fashionable, refined, and modern styles, impeccable service, and cosmopolitan surroundings. Henry's was a noted destination for sophisticated shoppers until they closed in 1993. So this store, this downtown store, is now Niche, the WSU Culinary School. So when you leave today, go out the William Street door, walk down to the old Innis building, keep going, and then go into Niche and get yourself a nice lunch. And marvel at how things have changed so dramatically downtown. But you can see some of the display windows there showing primarily women's clothing. A very different store from Innis in many ways. They focused on clothing accessories. They had luggage, they had some small appliances, they had housewares, but primarily their focus was clothing, cosmetics, fragrance, that sort of thing. But they did not have the range of products that Innis did. Here's another view of that same store. The Fairland Cafe is next door. You can kind of barely make out that sign. And then next to that is the Union National Bank building. That's now the Ambassador Hotel. And this photograph was taken in 1956. 2 years later, the Dockham drugstore sit-in, which the Dockham was on the front level, or first level of that UNB building. That's where the Dockham sit-in occurred. And you can read more about that at the end of this hallway. But it was the first successful student-led sit-in for civil rights in the nation. It happened in 1958, right about this time. It was in the summer. But another great view of that store and that intersection. Again, very busy. There are some parking meters by this time. Parking meters have been introduced. This is an interior view of that downtown store. Again, very different from Innis in that it was just more sophisticated and more elegant. Beautiful furniture in which to sit. This is the women's coat department. If you're with your spouse or loved one, they could sit in these chairs, smoke a cigarette. That was not uncommon at this time, and very comfortable. The clerk would bring you the coats that she thought might suit your needs the best. Again, just a very different chandelier at the top, very different way of shopping. This is the ground level of that downtown department store, decorated for Christmas, a very modern take on Christmas. Again, the furnishings are very streamlined. In 1954, Henry's opened a suburban store at Douglas and Oliver. So Douglas and Oliver was considered the suburbs in 1954. And it was a store primarily of clothing. In 59, they opened a store across the street that catered to young Wichitans. It was said to be the fashion center for young Wichitans. And so those two stores together were called Twin Corners. Both of those buildings are still there. I think the one is Ferguson Phillips, and I cannot for the life of me think of what the other was. The Hill. Okay, it's the Hill. The Hill's the one. I knew it was a restaurant of some kind, but I couldn't think of what it was. And these stores were open until 1975. And this is the women's part of Twin Corners, the lower level. Umbrellas, handbags, jean nete is for sale there. Hats. Again, a more limited offering than what you would have found at Henry's. And then the clothing would have been upstairs. But just beautiful modern architecture. I just love it. In 76, they opened a store in Twin Lakes in the lower level. I think that's still there. I don't know what it is now. Does anyone? Someone shouted out what it is, but I didn't hear. It's a Dollar Tree? Oh, that hurts. That hurts. She says it's a Dollar Tree. Well, nothing stays the same, folks. Things change and move on. But this store was operated in Twin Lakes until, I think, 1982. I have it written down somewhere, and I forgot to put it in my notes. But they closed when they opened a store at Town West. And this is the Town West store. It opened in 1981. This is a view from inside the mall looking into the store. The facade, if you drive by Town West, you'll see the facade is very similar on the outside. It's now like a country and western dance hall or something. And here's another view of that store from 1981. Very stylish. But if you're like me, the store that you really remember is the one at Town East. And this is the Town East store. It opened in 1975. This is Von Maur now. The facade changed. Henry's changed the facade in the early 90s. So it doesn't quite look, well, obviously it doesn't look like this, but you wouldn't recognize even the Von Maur facade from this photograph. But this was a really wonderful store, and this featured that glass elevator. When they opened the store in 75, it was a huge event. The governor was there. Governor Bennett is seen on the elevator there at the far left, and then Leo Levitt is at the far right. So it was a big affair. This is that kind of that marble floor, looking down the length of the store on the second level, and just very sophisticated potted plants, marble thick carpeting, beautiful mannequins and beautiful clothes. This is the women's salon. They had a lot of like little boutique areas, especially for women's clothing. They would have sportswear, designer wear, evening wear, lingerie, better sportswear, lots of different little boutique areas, each with its own theme and look. This one has that central chandelier, and again, the same kind of furnishings that you would have seen at that downtown store, because Rochelle Levitt had a very specific kind of taste. Thick carpet, things beautifully arranged, not racks of clothes all piled and shoved together and you're sorting through. Just a very relaxed kind of feeling. This is another women's area. Got again a different vibe because of that wallpaper and kind of that lattice work in the back. chairs at the center again, so you could sit and be comfortable. A kind of a kimono-style dress there at the front. Again, this is all 1975, so very much of the time period that green carpet would have been very thick and plush, and they would have had music, music piped in. This is the women's shoe salon. Someone would have come out and measured your foot and brought you a selection of shoes to try on. And when you were done, you would go to the counter and you'd pay for your purchases. It was just a different way. Again, chandeliers, gold carpet, very expensive wallpaper. This was a very expensive store, very expensive store. This is the area they called Hanks. So again, a totally different feel, that pegged wood floor. This was for a young men and women. It was for teenagers, young adults. Henry's at the time thought that young men and women would like to shop together and would like the idea of shopping alongside one another. I don't know, it really didn't take off. But, I notice now that many of these clothing stores have unisex changing rooms, which I find a little bizarre. But anyway, they did sell these things for men and women in the same space. Children's clothes. I hope your kids are not afraid of clowns because they're featured. But again, very playful, bright colors, circus theme, cute overalls, anything you would want for a baby, but not overcrowded. You're not overwhelmed with choices. And again, there'd be some nice person there to help you make your selection. The men's department, this is taken from the mezzanine area. Racks of shirts. You've got these kind of clubby chairs at the center, and it's hard to see, but there's an ice bucket and some cocktail glasses, so I guess, have a whiskey while you're waiting to, try on your leisure suit. It was a different time. It was very, very sophisticated back then. Have a cigarette, cigar, whatever. The leisure suit. So popular in 1975, available in a wide variety of colors. They had different lengths of jackets. I can pretty much guarantee these were 100% polyester, so easy care, flammable. So, and you can see the boys' department is back there. So this is the first floor. So again, every department had like a different feel. So it was almost like you were in little boutiques across the store. Okay, I want to end with this jacket because this jacket was retailed at Henry's Quad Shop. The Quad Shop was a store specifically for teenage boys, 13 to 19 boys. And the nehru jacket was named after the then Prime Minister of India, Nehru. It was popularized by the Beatles. It was super, super hot for about 5 minutes in 1968. And then it completely went out of fashion. But this was retailed at Henry's in the Quad Shop. Someone bought it, took it home. It languished in their closet for about 30 years. And then they decided, or someone decided, we're never going to wear this. Let's give it to the Goodwill. So someone donated this to the Goodwill. And then when I was shopping at Goodwill in 2001, I found this jacket. And I was so thrilled because we have so few things of this time period. We have so few things that represent young men, and we have so few things that are so a cultural moment. I mean, encapsulated in one piece of clothing. So I bought this in 2001 at the Goodwill, and brought it to the museum. It was a museum purchase. And it's been on exhibit a couple of times. It was featured in Coffee and Cocktails at the Wichita Art Museum, and it's now on exhibit at in our Thrift Finds display. But, how much did I pay for it? Probably $3 or $4. And I'll bet that retailed for about $70 or $80 in 1968. So yes, it was a bargain. But I'm so grateful that someone thought to donate that to a thrift store. I'm so grateful that it stayed in Wichita. I'm grateful that we have it in our collection. I'm grateful that you donate to thrift stores. I'm grateful that you shop at thrift stores, and that's about it for me. I do want to sum up with my favorite thrift stores. I have to say Economy Corner would be at the very, very tip top of that list. That was the greatest thrift store ever. But my current favorites are Goodwill at 37th and Oliver. That's the store I grew up going to. We moved to Bel Air in '78, so that's the store I grew up going to. The Goodwill in Twin Lakes. It's smaller than all the other Goodwills, but I like it. The Et Cetera shops in Newton and Hillsborough. They're both operated by the Mennonite Central Committee, so again, a very strong mission-focused store. They do great work. The Salvation Army Family Store in El Dorado can be a little gritty in there sometime. You know, it's not the boutique kind of feeling you get from the Assistance League, but it's a great store, and I found some wonderful things there. And then finally, the Assistance League, which is a wonderful store in Wichita. They, to me, kind of follow that model of the Junior League, that it's very well curated. They take a lot of care in merchandising. They're selective about what they put out. They're very helpful. So I encourage you to shop at any and all of these thrift stores. And we're going to, after this, take a look at the Thrift Finds exhibit, and I'm happy to answer any questions or if you have comments that you want to share. This is the last slide, so that's it for me. Oh, thank you.